right, guys, so as you know, I start my day the same every single day. I wake up earlier than I want to, I get a cup of coffee, and I start surfing the news. I got it on the television, and I'm scanning the interwebs to see what's interesting, to dissect, and come to bring to you guys. So I have joined in studio today. Clifton Molitor, attorney and friend of the show, is back because, Clifton, what the hell is going on with this college scandal / Hollywood VIP list that we're all hearing about? Where should I start this story?
There are so many different ways to go with this, but there is an enterprise that some gentlemen formed to where they would help children of wealthy or famous people get into colleges that they would otherwise not get into. And, you know, there's some of the best universities in the world that are on there. There's Yale, Stanford. Some of the big players. And, of course, the University of San Diego. So the big universities.
Okay, so I'm trying to dissect this, and I've been watching it all day. I've been reading about it all day, but it's like this octopus with all these different arms. So ultimately, some guy, and there's one guy, and he's been to court already. He actually walked right in and pled guilty to a litany of charges. I mean, money laundering was one of them. One of the bigger problems that I'm trying to set this up for the audience that's been living under a rock. And Cliff, I just don't know how to begin it, so I'm just diving into this thing full force. But there's a guy. The guy put some scam together that involved rigging the SATs. I'm told that students would go in and take the SATs, and somebody would kind of correct the answers before they submit it to go through the machine. He went out to the famous celebrities, these A-listers, if you will, and here, from a legal standpoint, I think this might be his biggest problem, and theirs. He set up a charity and goes, okay, donate big money to this charity, and I'll get your kids into colleges. Oh, and by the way, since it's a charity, feel free to write this off. Now, that's where the handcuffs come in, as I'm seeing it. He then, as you said, had administration officials at some of the top colleges in the world, in our country, also on the take. How exactly he was facilitating and getting the funds to them, I'm not yet aware. But ultimately, he was getting kids into schools where they didn't belong. And the downside to that, before anybody goes, well, yeah, that's just kind of the way it works. The downside is, no, there was kids that worked hard but didn't have, whether it was the appetite for the injustice, for the criminal activity, or the funds to do it, or the parents to make the phone call. So there is victims in this, even if you don't see them right up front. Cliff, also, and I'm hoping you can speak on this because I'm jumping around. Did you see where he was even putting them on sports teams? Like crew, by example, when the kids had never even done crew before.
Yeah, no, and so an octopus, I think, is a good way to describe this. It's really rather ingenious, I think, how he did it. So, yeah, he set up a charity. There was also a for-profit entity. And so, as best that I can understand it, the people would pay money in up to $6.5 million to do this. And then he had various people on the take. So, like you said, some people would he would work on getting them better SAT scores. And he would say, okay, tell the parents, well, claim that your child has a learning disability. And so if you have a learning disability, you can often get significantly more time to take the SATs. And then he would have some of the proctors giving the exams. He would either correct the test for them, give them extra time, or they're alleging in certain instances they would have a ringer come in and take the test for them. I saw somewhere that one kid improved over the PSAT to the SAT 400 points, which is, just a crazy,
quite a leap.
Yeah, quite a leap. And so that's how they did it on the testing front. And then they also had people at the various universities in the athletic departments would list some of these kids as recruits to the school when they either had never played the sport, didn't play the sport competitively, and they also even went as far as to Photoshop their kids' head onto the body of an actual competitive athlete.
Okay, see, now that we've told the story, again, for anybody that just hasn't been exposed to this, and we dove right into it, but Cliff, one of the biggest reasons In the history of the world, anybody ever gets caught in a crime is because somebody talks. And the most obvious crimes are the ones where you bring in a lot of people. I just could only imagine how quickly this would unravel when you're photoshopping your kid's face on the face of another athlete that happens to belong to a team, by the way, who's going to see that photo at something called social media, I would assume, and go, they're not on our team. As a matter of fact, not only are they not on our team, that's my body. I mean, right. When you bring in so many different people, how long was he getting away with this, by the way?
I haven't seen, but I think it's been a long time.
Okay. So he pulled it off for a while.
And I think made a lot of money. I mean, there were, I think, 44 people who were indicted. I mean, there were a lot of people that were involved in this and indicted. And of course, if there were 44 people that were indicted, there's many, many more who were involved and just either haven't been charged yet or somehow aren't going to be charged.
So the kids knew about this. The kids had knowledge.
One thing that I read said that most of, if not all of the kids did not know this was going on and that their parents were doing it.
Oh, really? Was that right? Okay. What I was going to say is I would imagine they had knowledge of it, but to this point, none have been charged and none are even expected to be charged. Whether I'm accurate on that or not, it still leads to my next question. Who all is at fault? From a legal standpoint, now I see where the parents are in a jam if they donated to a fake charity and then wrote that off. They're in a big problem now. Now you've got conspiracy and fraud and all sorts of different things. Take that legal element out of it. If a parent had an opportunity to have an in with some kind of a fixer, right? Because there's people out there that go, hey, I help you with your SATs. I had one of them. Now, what that consisted of is she came over to my mother's house, we sat in the kitchen, and we read the hell out of the books. I'm just saying, there are people out there that are, most of them are called tutors, but if you meet a guy that's like, I have another way, and here's the way. From a legal standpoint, where is your fault as a parent that goes, yeah, I'm willing to pay $10,000 in tutoring fees, or I'm willing to pay you $10,000, and it looks like we're doing a little something off grid here. But is that on them? Or is that on the guy with the power that takes the money and goes and facilitates things?
Well, it's on both because the parents have committed fraud. And one of the fraud has, there's many definitions and there's many ways to commit fraud, but it's generally a wrongful or criminal deception intended to result in financial or personal gain. And of course, the deception was the wrongful part of it was either cheating on the SATs or photoshopping your kid's head onto some other kid's body or claiming that your kid was a star athlete when they weren't. I mean, all of this is deception because it's all either untrue or you're cheating. And the personal gain aspect of it is, well, your kids get into a better school than they should be getting in. And so that's fraud on the parents' part. And then a lot of it was mail fraud, and so mail fraud is generally fraud that's committed using the U.S. Postal Service. So you take your college transcript that says you with your falsified or cheating SAT scores, or with a picture of your body photoshopped onto somewhere else, and then you stick it in the mail. All of a sudden, that's mail fraud. Or if you're sending, and there's also I think allegations of wire fraud. Wire fraud is then you send a wire to the charity, to perpetrate these frauds. And so then that's wire fraud. And so I think one of the interesting things is, have you heard of RICO?
Of course.
Which was, passed in the 70s to fight mobsters, the mafia. And it was used to bring down a lot of the, crime families and crime syndicates, but it's, still a law in the books, and now it's used for things like this. And what, a RICO, and RICO is very complicated, but what it is you have an enterprise, which is a, kind of a group or an organization. It could be a partnership, a corporation, it could be a mafia family. And the enterprise is essentially in the business of committing crimes. And there, I think, are 35 odd crimes that qualify as, predicate acts for a RICO violation. And then you have to have 2 or more of those in a 10-year period. And so the mastermind who was organizing and perpetrating all these frauds, he was charged and I believe pled guilty to RICO violations. And that's a big, big deal. And so then what it does is it just gives the federal government the ability to charge more people, I believe, with greater sentences, and it allows the federal government to really hammer these people.
And is that what they're looking to? And RICO has something to do with interstate as well, correct? Don't you have to cross state lines to qualify for RICO?
You do, yeah. And, a lot of states have similar RICO statutes. But, yeah, generally the federal government, in order to commit, and there's federal statutes, and a lot of federal statutes you have to cross state lines in order to violate a federal statute. Like there's state law fraud claims. So if I, fraudulently, got you to sell me your car for, less than what it was worth, I committed some sort of fraud on you. Well, we're both in the state of Oregon. That's probably a state law fraud case. But if I get you to sell me your car fraudulently, but I do it through sending something through the U.S. Postal Service, the U.S. Postal Service is regulated by the federal government, so all of a sudden that's a federal crime. So federal crimes often will have similar sentences to state law crimes, but the difference is the FBI investigates and other federal agencies investigate federal crimes, and they just have a much bigger hammer than most of the state agencies do.
So my guess is the gentleman who organized this and set up the charity and took the money and made the contacts and was the ringleader, I imagine he's going to do some real time. I don't think that the DA or the prosecutor is going to be nice to him, and I base that on the fact that I watched a spokesperson, and possibly it was the DA or the prosecutor himself, but whoever spoke on behalf, he was pretty upset about this. He was pretty upset that this was going on, that it was attempted, that it worked, and to go back to what I was saying earlier, that kids who earned the opportunity and should have been given admittance to some of these universities did not get it, all while the rich and powerful were gaming the system. He seemed pretty upset. Am I right, though, you'd have to guess, but I guess when I first saw Felicity Huffman comes to mind, because I watched Desperate Housewives. I just watched 3 Billboards outside of Ebbing, Missouri. Right? I'm a fan of hers. Am I wrong to believe that nothing much is going to happen to them? They saw an opportunity and they took it. Or is that wrong? Is somebody looking to cuff her up?
Well, my understanding is she's already been arrested. And she was, as of this morning when I think I last looked, she was in custody. And then I saw also that the woman from Full House, Aunt Becky, I think, that they were arranging to have her arrested in the afternoon. Are they going to do time? Probably not. I wouldn't think so. It's a white-collar offense. They'll probably get put on probation, and I doubt that they'll do any time, but they'll probably have to pay some fines and things like that.
Felony?
They're being charged with a felony, yeah.
When you say, and I also saw that, am I saying this right? Felicia Huffman?
Felicity.
Thank you very much.
I think it's Felicity.
Felicity. Yeah. I also saw that she was arrested, but did that involve like a search warrant and handcuffs and they took her into custody, or was that, hey, call your attorney, come down here, we're going to book you?
I think it's you. I'm guessing it's the latter.
Okay. She's not going to have to post bail, correct?
Well, I saw that I think they called it a signature bail. So basically it's a promise that you will show up in court. So she didn't have to, post $10,000 bail or anything like that. Really
tough spot, too. And the prosecutor, or at least the spokesman for the prosecution here, I don't have his name or title, but he did say something, and he made this kind of clear. Before anybody could go, aren't these waters always muddied? Aren't they always muddied in this country about how you do it? He stepped right in front of that before anybody asked, and he said, there are many ways that the wrong people get admitted to these colleges. One of them is some donor puts their name on a building and donates a building and says, and by the way, my grandson just applied. He goes, that's a bribe, but it does work that we see that. This is totally different than misrepresenting, cheating on the SAT, coming in with sports scholarships. And he touched on that one, too, to say something that you could even donate to a sports team, and an athlete that wasn't all that good is likely to then get placed on that team. That's true. I could give you examples that I've seen in my own life of that. But he's saying this is further. This was absolutely meant as a deception. And he was pissed, quite frankly, Clifton. If you watch, he was upset. Almost like maybe there was a personal tie to it, that in his youth and him climbing up and him working hard and people stepping in front of him. But I could see an anger in his face. Did you happen to watch that press conference when he was talking about who he's coming after and why?
No, I didn't. But I guess it's not surprising. And I think, I didn't get into the college that I wanted to when I was coming out of high school. And it still bothers me to this day. So that I think you might be onto something that, yeah, maybe he wanted to get into Harvard and he didn't, and he's had that chip on his shoulder and he's fought and fought and fought the whole way. I mean, that certainly could be the case. Or, I mean, this is, there were a lot of crimes committed here. There was a lot of money involved. He could just be, a very zealous, advocate. And, I mean, these are serious crimes. So, and that's what he's supposed to do. He's supposed to get upset about this.
Can I switch directions on you? Patriots owner. Help me with his name. I want to say Jerry Jones.
Yeah, Robert Kraft.
Robert Kraft. He's in a jam. You followed that?
Yep.
Went into the massage parlor. From a legal standpoint, without being a defense attorney, but just take your best guess here. I'm looking at that and I'm saying, hey, this simply isn't going to stick. To have a solicitation, and they say, well, we've got the whole thing on video. A solicitation would have to be where he makes the proposition that has to be unwanted, by the way, and works out some kind of terms, which they simply don't have. Now, I'm aware of why they don't have it. I'm not being crazy on this. They don't have it because he's a return customer and those conversations were had before the cops ever put the cameras in. I get all of that. But isn't this a miss? Isn't this something that probably never should? What are you possibly going to do with two consenting adults and no video of a proposition and the onus being on the business owner, not on the customer? Aren't they just setting out to embarrass a guy?
Well, I think anytime that there is a sexual act and then money is exchanged, I think and they have that on video, I think the chances are pretty good they've got him on this. And I think they also had, my understanding is they've got recordings too of this, and so it wouldn't surprise me if they do have and maybe not with the owner of the Patriots, but maybe with other people where they come in and say, well, so it's $100 for this, or it's $200 for that, or whatever it is. And then it's much, much clearer. It's like, okay, well, we're bargaining for a sexual act here. But I think any time that there's a sexual act and money is exchanged, I don't do this type of work, but I think his goose is probably cooked.
I'll tell you where I get annoyed with this, and probably the only reason I'm even bringing it up is, one, it sure does seem like a lot of work for a misdemeanor. Take it from that standpoint. Now, Florida's choosing to pay for it. I guess that's on their taxpayers to speak out whether they agree or they don't. But secondly, the story has never been told the way the story should be told, which is if you're talking about people who are being enslaved and put into a sex trafficking ring, that's the story. The cop himself that went in there for a massage and he was just a regular customer, he looks around and goes, it looked like these women were living there. I want to go in and free them and find out what's going on. That seems like a tremendous story and even a noble act on his behalf where he should get a medal put on him. But for some reason, it's not where the media is going. They just went out to try to embarrass a guy on charges of which may or may not stick, but ultimately result in a misdemeanor anyway. I just wish the story would get told. If these women are being forced and now they're being freed, it seems like we've got the villain and the hero of the story. Why is that not the story?
Well, I completely agree with you. And, I think mostly because that doesn't sell. But, the owner of the Patriots getting a hand job in a massage parlor in Florida sells.
There it is.
I mean, that's the only difference. And like you said, I don't have personal experience of this, but I would bet, within 10 square blocks of where we're sitting, there's probably at least half a dozen massage parlors where you and I could go and get, a happy ending that aren't ever going to get, busted because it's probably women in there and men or whoever's in there who are there voluntarily and are just trying to make a little bit of extra money. I think, the real reason that Florida is spending the money to do this is because you literally have, the allegations are people coming in from other countries who are being enslaved. I mean, it's human trafficking and sex trafficking.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I think that really should be the focus of this story.